I know I cannot raise my hand against you, but know this. You are my greatest disappointment. Does your master hear me? Atlas, you can kill me, but you will never have my city!
Welcome to yet another episode of Rediscovering Rapture. I'm your host, Logan Moore. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the main characters that inhabit the world of BioShock. In episode 1, we took a look at Rapture, which I argued was the game's most important character despite it being the setting of the game. What we'll be examining in this episode, however, are the actual persons that make up Rapture's population, as well as trying to understand how our protagonist fits into the game's narrative. When talking about any characters that we come across in BioShock, all conversations typically begin and end with Andrew Ryan. We spoke about Ryan a bit in episode 1, as he is the founder of Rapture. In the process, we also got a better sense of the ideals of the man, as well as his purpose for founding the city, which was to escape what he calls the parasites of the real world.
You can taste it, can't you? Andrew Ryan.
As we find Ryan when entering Rapture at the beginning of the game, he comes across as desperate and paranoid. We're also led to believe that the disaster that Rapture has become is because of his doing. Because of this, our player character teams up with a mysterious figure simply known as Atlas to pursue Ryan.
Everyone wants to question Providence. I'm Atlas, and I aim to keep you alive.
Even though we don't know hardly anything of this Atlas fellow, he's the only one who shows us any sort of kindness. The strange Irishman kindly asks you to help him save his family and promises to help you escape Rapture in the process.
Listen, I've got a family. I need to get them out of here.
Of course, those who have played BioShock know that Atlas isn't who he seems to be, and is instead a man named Frank Fontaine. Fontaine is Ryan's main adversary within Rapture and desperately wants control of the city for himself. We learn about Fontaine's uprising throughout the course of BioShock, learned that he partnered with the less fortunate members of Rapture to lead a revolt against Ryan and take back the city.
Before I knew it, I was calling myself Atlas and leading an army.
While Ryan and Fontaine's struggle for control of Rapture takes center stage in BioShock, the most important character is that of who the player controls. While never directly named outside of a note in the opening of the game, our protagonist, simply known as Jack, finds himself stumbling into the events that transpire within Rapture. However, what we come to realize is that his involvement is anything but happenstance. We're led to believe upon entering Rapture that Jack happened to just fall into this mess blindly. Instead, we learn that Jack is a character that was born into Rapture. Well, kind of. As we progress through the story of BioShock, we eventually learn that Fontaine is essentially the father of Jack, and genetically created him alongside Dr. Suchong, a scientist within the city. Jack also has the same genetic code as Andrew Ryan, but that's explained subtly throughout the course of the game. Fontaine uses Jack as his quote-unquote ace in the hole, to arrive in Rapture as a foreigner and eventually kill Ryan. It's in this moment over halfway through the game where Jack kills Ryan, but in the process we learn the true motivations behind each character within the game. What's most telling about Ryan's character is that he stays true to his beliefs all the way up until his death. Ryan hates the idea of being a slave to society and knows that that's all that Jack is, a slave.
A man chooses, a slave obeys.
Ryan informs both Jack and the player that they have been controlled all along through the use of a key phrase that Fontaine used, the phrase in question being, "Would you kindly?"
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Eventually, Jack is able to break the control that Fontaine has over him through the help of a character named Tenenbaum, before finally facing off with Fontaine in a rather anticlimactic showdown at the finale of the game. The true genius of BioShock, however, lies in this "would you kindly" phrase. See, while Jack is an established character within Rapture, what he's truly meant to represent is the player. Video games always have objectives and goals to them, but what's the incentive for the player to carry them out? Why do we happen to always do the exact same thing that the game asks of us without any sort of question? BioShock subverts this by instead telling us that our reason for doing so was because we were being mind-controlled the entire time. The developers of BioShock capitalized on player agency in video games in a way that no one else thought to, and in the process, created one of the great twists in video game narratives. "Would you kindly" is now one of the most famous quotes in all of gaming, and is easily the most memorable line of the game to those who play it. While we've talked a lot about some of the main players within BioShock, there's still a handful of other characters that we haven't even touched upon. Characters like Dr. Steinman, Peach Wilkins, and of course the irreverent artist Sander Cohen play important roles within BioShock, but they aren't as central to the overall plot. Despite these characters not having as large of an impact on the game's overall narrative, they're well written nonetheless and will leave a lasting impression on you long after the credits have rolled. On the next episode of Rediscovering Rapture, we'll move away from the story and the setting that we've discussed so far and instead talk about gameplay elements. You know, using guns to kill people, the fun parts of the game. Until then, see you next time.